Hello all, I'm here today to talk about a recent article with the journal Review of International Studies. It's called Dirty Hands, Savage Enemies and Bad Apples, a taxonomy of war crimes, apologia. So this article was written with Jessica Wolfendale, Chris Elliott and myself. And basically it started from an observation that in terms of war crimes, it's a pretty dismal time right now. More states and more militaries are committing more war crimes, and they're also defending the commission of war crimes rather than simply denying the commission of war crimes. So we wanted to understand this better. And what we've done in this article is try to systematically overview various forms of war crimes, apologia. And then just to be clear, with war crimes denialism, that's much more straightforward, not to say it's not problematic. That's just denying the existence of a war crime. Apologism is a little different. Apologist narratives attempt to portray the crime's circumstances, the perpetrator's character and motives, and the broader context in which the crime occurred in ways that minimize or negate the perpetrator's moral and sometimes legal blameworthiness. So what we've tried to do in this article is create a typography of different kinds of apologist narratives. Now I'll hand it over.
Thanks, Dale. So we identify three different categories of war crimes apologia. And all the categories, as Neil pointed out, aim to either diminish the perpetrator's responsibility, or sometimes they attribute responsibility but claim that the war crimes are justified or necessary for different reasons. So the first category we call individualising apologia, and there are two sort of subcategories there. One is the bad apples narrative, and this is, as the name suggests, the view that if war crimes occur, they're committed by one or maybe a handful of particularly bad actors. It's not institutional issues. There's no underlying cultural problem within the military that contributes to the war crimes. It's just these particular bad people. The second version is isolated incidents, and these often go hand in hand. So along with claiming that war crimes are perpetrated by a handful of particularly bad actors, it's often also claimed that the number of specific incidences is quite low. And in the paper, we give real-life examples of all of these war crimes apologia. And so a number of, for example, of these apologia appear in the way the Australian media and politicians have responded to, or at least some politicians have responded to accusations of war crimes committed by Australian special forces in Afghanistan. And there we see bad apples and isolated incidences quite a lot. The second category is what we call excusatory narratives. And these, again, we have two subcategories. One is the hell is war category. And this is the idea that, look, war crimes occurred, but the perpetrators are not blameworthy because they're just, the pressures of war are so great that, in a sense, it's unreasonable to expect soldiers to abide by the laws of war in those kinds of circumstances. So, the war is hell. It's impossible to have moral and legal restraint in war. So, in a sense, we can't really blame soldiers who commit war crimes. The second version is a little different. It's immorality of restraint. And there the idea is that, look, it's actually unfair to expect soldiers to abide by the laws of war. So in a sense, even trying to impose moral and legal restraints is problematic given the nature of combat. The third group of narratives are called justificatory narratives. And these really are ones where the war crimes themselves are in a sense acknowledged to have occurred, but either they're claimed to be necessary, regretfully necessary, because of, for example, the particular kind of threat the enemy poses, and those are sometimes called dirty hands narratives. And the other subcategory is savage enemy. And we see again, these go hand in hand, that facing a particular kind of enemy means that you have to take the gloves off. And that's language that we've actually seen quite recently used by one of the officers in the Israeli Defense Force, talking about the gloves coming off in relation to Gaza. So that's a very brief overview of the narratives. The paper also then goes into talk about what's problematic about these narratives, critiquing the assumptions that they make about the possibility of wartime compliance, about the source and force of the laws of war. And we also unpack about how these narratives contribute not just to the lack of accountability for war crimes perpetrators, which is an ongoing issue, but also make the perpetration of war crimes more likely. And also, and I think this is something which is sometimes neglected, these narratives inflict an ongoing injustice on the victims of war crimes themselves. And in conclusion, what we try and do is look at how, and this is what we hope people take away from the paper, how being able to identify these narratives is crucial to undermining their capacity to legitimise war crimes. And so we think these paper could actually be quite useful both for people researching war crimes, but also for things like military education. Knowing about them is half the battle.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of what we're hoping the contribution of this article is, what we hope you get out of it when you read it, we want less war crimes, and we want less toleration and celebration of war crimes by the public, by militaries, by the media, and by government elites in some cases. And the very first step to doing that is to recognize that war crimes are an indefensible immorality, and there's no room and no space for downplaying their severity. And in collecting this systematic overview of how that's so often done through apologist narratives, we're hoping to kind of conquer them and diffuse them and take some of the sting out of them. But yeah, that's our article. We hope you read it.